The Rebbe MaharaSh passed away the youngest of all the Chabad Rabbeim, the Nesiim. He didn't have the shortest Nesias. The Mittler Rebbe had the shortest Nesias. Mittler Nesias was less than 15 years. The Rebbe MaharaSh Nesias was almost 18 years, 17 and a half, 18 years. And the emphasis, it's mamish 18 years because the Tzemach Tzedek passed away at Pesach. Tzemach Tzedek told the Rebbe MaharaSh Tishrei Tov Reish Chavov, that he should start saying Chassidus. It's interesting. This is an interesting thing that 6 months before the Stalkos of the Tzemach Tzedek gave the Rebbe MaharaSh a rod that should say Chassidus Fan Elam. And he did with my morim. You can see my morim from Tov Reish Chavov. It starts Tishrei, it doesn't start Pesach. The Rebbe used to speak about the Rabbeim. And he used to say, Beklal, was versteht man in an Anok? What, there's an Anok and there's a Nanas, there's a midget and a giant. We're in Nasim, we're midgets, the Rebbeim, the Rebbe Simson and an Anok. And the Rebbe said, how do you measure one Anok against another Anok? How do you measure one giant against another? The fact, however, is that each one of the Rebbeim had a different Seder, a different Anhoge. The Rebbe MaharaSh Anhoge, by the Rebbe MaharaSh, Melechatchila Rebbe wasn't a slogan. It was mamish way of life. Everything about the Anhoga of the Rebbe MaharaSh from childhood was an eifers Melechatchila Rebbe. He was pushing. He was bigger than the world. He had no fear. He was afraid of nothing. Mamish. The Rebbe MaharaSh was afraid of nothing. As a little kid yet, his Anhoga was mamish Melechatchila Rebbe. The Frierdiker Rebbe says that the Rebbe MaharaSh, I'll tell you a Maisa, different way, folks. Stam Azari, I'm not Chas Shalom. I'm not learning the Maisa, I'm just telling the Maisa. Rabbi Fuchs was my Melamed.
Which one?
Hershel Fuchs, Shmuel Tzvi Fuchs, the Melamed. He taught me Bava Basra in 6th grade in Tovshin Lamed Bov. Yeah. Hashut from Shiraz, Lasses Bechitza Bechotzer, ha? Yeah, I'm 55 years old. I'll save you the cheshbonis. For the Zog.
I had it for Shabbos. I had it for Shabbos.
The Sechta Shabbos. You remember? He used to do the pin trick. You know that? He'd put his finger. Gemara Rashi, the Tesis, and Rashbam. He'd turn the page. He'd tell you what word was under his finger. It was frightening. I saw him do it.
The photograph, remember?
Whatever. Rabbi Fuchs was such a bitterlik, it was disgusting. He took up no space. But it was a big, big lamb. He knew Tanya, cover to cover, not L'Kutei Amorim. But he knew Kunter Sacher and word for word.
But it didn't show any...
Nothing! He came up, he said, I pushed it. He was so unbelievable. He was just a sweet man. So he told me many stories. Many years after I was out of his class, he would tell me stories. So one of the stories he told me was the following. He heard the story for Reb Chatzah. His mashpia, Reb Chatzah was the Frierdiker secretary. But the Chatzah was around in Poland and Advotsk, so he saw the Chatzah. Occasionally the Chatzah Farbrengen. The Chatzah told him a story. That when he was in Lubavitch, he had given a yid, a oisher, a businessman, a gvir, who would come to Lubavitch, he would come to the Rebbe Rashab, and he would be by the Chassidus, whatever it was, but he came he had a eitzah in Yeshiva. He would come to the Rebbe Rashab to consult about his business, and the Rebbe gave him eitzahs, and the eitzah some garbage at Gelungen, The eitzah of a Rebbe has one rule. You just got to do what he says and it all works out. How did this person... And Rabbi Fuchs told me that Rabbi Chatzah told him the name and he forgot the name. And he was sort of beating himself up for forgetting the name. So I can make up the name, but that'll be made up. How did this person come to Lubavitch? He was not to Lubavitch a Chazar, he was B'chala Chazar. In Tov Reish Mem Dalet, a year after the Stalkos of the Rebbe MaharaSh, this man was sitting on the train. He was a businessman. Business people travel second class. Today they call it business class. It was first class, third class, first class, second class, third class. Third class was for everybody. First class was for the multimillionaires and for the schnutters. Second class was for business people. Now they call it business class. I'm always been second class. So this man's traveling second class, a businessman. And he sees another from Yid also traveling second class. So he goes over to him, Shalom Aleichem, from Lubavitch. Lubavitch. I hear that Lubavitch is a whole situation. The Rebbe is Avek, the Rebbe MaharaSh was nostalgic. And there's a big discussion about Mamala Mokum. The Rebbe Rashab was not yet 22. The Razor was not yet 23. And they were the two candidates. So he says to this person, he says, I hear that there's two candidates for Rebbe, an older brother and a younger brother. But the Deutsche Reshumis and the Deutsche Chamuris, the Sefer, the Chevre was halten Kopf are saying, at the younger Rebbe sein Rebbe. The younger one is going to be Rebbe, not the older one. Was kannst du mir sagen? Was kannst du mir sagen mit dem jüngeren Sohn von dem Rebbe that Tzemach passed away? So this traveler says to this businessman, was is it? Aber zum Taten kommt nicht. He is what he is, but he's not his father. Was is it? Aber zum Taten kommt nicht. This is what he tells him. And the train pulls into the next station. He looks out the window, and there's hundreds of chassidim on the train station. So he gets out of the train, he says, Mai Hai. He says, what's Mai Hai, the Rebbe? The person he conversed with was the Rebbe Rashab himself. And he asked the Rebbe Rashab his opinion of the Rebbe Rashab. So the Rebbe Rashab answered him. He didn't lie. Was is it? So when he realized what happened, that he just asked the Rebbe Rashab Bevinis on himself, so he had to sort of fix it. So he took his packages off the train, and he went into Yechidus. And he asked Eitzes in business. He wanted to see how it would work out. And it worked out good enough. He should come a second time and a third time. Anyway, that's the Sipah. The Rebbe MaharaSh. So I wanted to say that Friedrich was gesagt from the Rebbe MaharaSh. That he was first was amazing about Yisurim. You know that. The Rebbe MaharaSh physically suffered. He was always in pain. Gefährliche Yisurim. In the Rebbe's Reshimis, it's written. People told me that the Rebbe had leukemia. I don't know if he's a Kleibezich Fernandez in these Sachen. That the Rebbe MaharaSh was very sick as a young man. He had pus packets. He had pus packets in his blood. But he didn't want that Tzemach Tzedek should know. Because he didn't want to cause his father Agmas Nefesh. Eventually the Tzemach Tzedek found out that he's sick. But by the time the Tzemach Tzedek found out that the Rebbe MaharaSh was sick, the Rebbe MaharaSh was terribly ill. Terribly ill. And Tzemach Tzedek complained to the Rebbe MaharaSh, why didn't you tell me sooner? Was mir gesagt, früher wollte ich dir, you can't help him. Tzemach Tzedek said, ist weiß ich nicht if I can help you? And he said, so Chodj sein wie Shmuel Anovi. Tzemach Tzedek hoped that the Rebbe MaharaSh would live 52 years. The Poignant lived 48 years. He didn't even live 52 years. He was always sick. But he always had a smile. The Rebbe always had a smile. And when he would look in your direction, he would start shaking. It made no difference. The MaharaSh always had a smile on his face, and wherever he looked, you started to shake in fear. You didn't know why you were afraid. This is the koyach of the Rebbe MaharaSh. And Melchatchila, his whole hanhoga, his whole life was an oath of Melchatchila. There's nothing to talk about. You read the stories, you see. The hanhoga is eine gewend mamish azami in oath von Melchatchila. Ich will erzählen aber ein Meise. This Maise is not such a Melchatchila Rebbe Maise. This is a Maise from Ke'ev. It's a painful story. And I think you could say that story, which starts when the Rebbe MaharaSh is becoming a Rebbe, is finishing now. It's in my opinion, it's a short little Maise, but it's a story of history. Tzemach Tzedek passed away, Yud Gimel Nisan. Right? The Tzemach Tzedek and the Rebbe MaharaSh are the same Yortzeit. Echad be'echad Yigarshu. Tzemach Tzedek passed away Echad be'echad, the 13th day of Chodesh Nisan. And the Rebbe MaharaSh passed away Echad be'echad, the 13th day of the month of Tishrei. Yud Gimel Nisan, Yud Gimel Tishrei. The Tzemach Tzedek told the Rebbe MaharaSh, Echad be'echad Yigarshu, they share Yortzeit. The Chodesh and the Kayetz. The Rebbe wants to explain why the Tzemach Tzedek is Nisan and the Rebbe MaharaSh is Tishrei, because it's Tzaddik and Baltshuva. A kid said, well, the Tzemach Tzedek passed away. A whole generation of Tzadikim passed away. A whole generation. By poignant Tzadikim, the Belze, and the Gere, when the Kotzker, a whole generation of Tzadikim passed away at that time. Mamish, maybe 20 or 30 Tzadikim. It was a huge blow to Chassidus. And the emphasis after that, the cloud Yiddishkeit in Europe had a big Yerida. During that winter, during the months leading up to the Stalkas of the Rebbe Tzemach Tzedek, so there was the Friedrich calls the Yemei HaPreidetek, the days of the goodbye. Tzemach Tzedek was saying goodbye to the Rebbe MaharaSh over the course of many months. A Rebbe at Tzaddik at Nasi, the Rebbe said many times, is a Balabos Bezich. Nothing happens by a Rebbe without his Rishus. Tzemach Tzedek was masking with the infinite Stalkos, Mepnei Siba, whatever the reason is. So he was saying goodbye to his son, his Ben Zkunim, Bnei Malakayim, Marash. So during that winter, it happened a few times. I don't know if a few times means 2 or 3 times or 10 times, but it doesn't really matter. It happened more than once. The Tzemach Tzedek called in the Rebbe MaharaSh. Tzemach Tzedek called in the Rebbe MaharaSh. The MaharaSh came in. The Tzemach Tzedek opened up a Midrash Rabbah on Shmois. The beginning of Shmois. Midrash Rabbah, the beginning of Shmois. It says, "Vayomas Yosef v'chol echav v'chol adei ההוא uvnei Yisrael paru v'yishatzu v'yirbu v'atzu v'yidmeit v'yazim v'yisham." So the Midrash says, "Vayomas Yosef v'chol echav v'chol adei ההוא," and he touches, "Afapi shemesu elu alikeim shalelu lemes." Even though all these tzadikim passed away, the God of these tzadikim didn't die. So Tzemach Tzedek would call the Rebbe MaharaSh. He'd call him in. And he would read, "Yomas Yosef Cholacha B'Chol Adei Afapi Shemesu Elu Alikeim Shalelu Leimes," and the Rebbe MaharaSh would stand and smile. Shmeichel. Then he would walk out of his father and go into the other room and then cry bitter, because he understood what his father was telling him. So Tzedek was saying to him, it's not the pshat as Geit Rebbe from Ador of Ador. You know, there's a Rebbe, there's another Rebbe, there's another Rebbe. You're entering into Tkufas HaChoshech. This is 1866, 150 years ago. He was saying to his son that with his Talkos of Tzemach Tzedek and all the Bnei Gilei, the beginning of the end of the golden age of Yiddishkeit in Europe is then. You know, in the Maimer from the Rebbe Rashab about Chassidus and about Mashiach, he says, Zman Krishma. You know the Maimer? Zman Krishma is 125 years after 500. Tov Reish Nun, 1890. 1890, the Rebbe Rashab writes, is the beginning of all the tzaddis. This is 25 years before that, 1866. And the Rebbe MaharaSh understood exactly what his father's telling him, that the tzadikim are going to pass away, and the level of Yiddishkeit is going to be challenged and attacked, and it's going to fall. And that's exactly how it played out. I wonder, I mean, this is a Chaltz speculation, but if Lubavitch had remained unified, if there had not been the split and the machlekes, Lubavitch was divided up into 4 groups. Of those 4 groups, the smallest was Lubavitch. Koppos was the biggest, and then was Ladid, then was Nezhin. Sheba Lubavitch was the smallest Chabad. By the time the Rebbe MaharaSh was Nistalik, people came, but it was very small. I wonder if things had been different, if all the different movements of Lubavitch had stayed under one umbrella, there had been one Rebbe rather than 4 or 5 Rebbes. I wonder. Mestame, it would have been the same thing. The bottom line is, until then, until the Stalkos of Tzemach Tzedek, the matzav of Yiddishkeit in Russia was pretty robust. It was ganz gut. Yidden were frum, but they were in frum in such a way, as the expression is, they were not on the inside looking out, they were on the inside. Beginning with the Nesias of the Rebbe MaharaSh, the Reform had been fighting with the Tzemach Tzedek for years, a scholar, to bring chidushim, to bring novelty, to bring modernness, to chinuch, to pedagogy. Tzemach Tzedek fought them like a lion. But there was a delaying tactic. The bottom line is that Tzemach Tzedek passed away, that generation passed away, the matzav of Yidden and Yiddishkeit began to decline. You could say that maybe you didn't see it right away, you know. Sometimes you have a frum Yid, yeah. But there's the expression, Friedrich Rebbe says, in a very cooking dress, he's stuck a frum, but he's looking outside. But Tzemach Tzedek, it wasn't that way. Beginning with the Rebbe MaharaSh Changiv Der Tkufa, that would really blow up completely by World War I, where millions of millions of Frume Yidden would stop being Frum. Millions of Jews. Millions of Yidden. How many Jews are there in the world today? I heard from the Rebbe over 30 years ago, 15 or 16 million. The Rebbe held that there were many, many Russians who were Jewish, who wrote themselves down as Russians because they didn't want to suffer from anti-Semitism. The Rebbe held there were a lot more Yidden in Russia. Fisher, there were 2 million Jews in Russia. The Rebbe held there was many, many more.
So it was 5 million before World War II.
Before?
World War II is 3.3 million.
How much?
3.3
What?
million.
In Russia. I saw a Sikha from Friedrich Rebbe. It says, Da on Ayin Hore 18 million Yidden ken Yirbo. It's so painful to read. There's 18 million Jews before the Holocaust. It says, Da on hora 18 million Yidden kein Yirbu. And then in the world. And Hitler took a third.
It says that there's 15.7 million people identifying as Jews.
Russia didn't document everything.
Identifying as Jews. But that's also higher than, most people say 14 million, even 13 million. The demographics are totally behergish, totally beplukta, totally bechochma, totally beshtus.
It depends on who's considered Jewish.
It all depends on who's deciding who's considered Jewish.
That's what I meant to say.
They're very pascal. And some people want there should be less Yidden because they just feel like that. It's better that there's less Jews, so they're more machmir. When it comes to you, they're very mekel. When it comes to the census, they're very frum. But what percentage of these Yidden are frum? If you tell me there's 1 million frum Yidden in the world, it's probably less.
No, there's more than that.
More than 1 million frum between the whole Williamsburg and the whole Bar Park and the whole Crown Heights. It's 50 million. What's next to it? Every block is 5 shuls. Okay, but the thing is, it's not 10%. It's not 1 out of 10 Jews is frum. Not more, probably less. Do you realize that not so long ago the numbers were reversed? Not so long ago, 9 out of 10 Yidden were frum. Before the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, before World War I and all the Tsars in Poland, Rubam Kekulim of the Yidden in Russia and Poland were Shemrei Teiro Mitzvah, and a lot of them were Charedim. They were very frum. It changed so fast. It changed so fast. But in many cases, the changes that you saw was like a rotten cadaver falling over, somebody dies. So the maggots eat him from the inside. So he's standing, and they eat, and they eat, and they eat, and they eat, and they eat until the skeleton can't hold up what's left and it falls. In other words, a lot of these Jews were frum, but they were looking out. They were looking out. When did they start looking out? In 1866. Again, in the Maimon it says 1890. What you had in Russia, which we know so well, the biggest yeshivas in the world were in Russia. There were hundreds of Talmidim, Pashat Iluyim. The yeshivas took the best bachrim. The level of limud in the famous yeshivas of the Misnagdim in Volozhin and Brisk and Baranovich and Telz and Mir, the yeshivas were huge. And the Nevadike, and the level of learning was very, very high, unbelievably high. You had many, many Bacharim from the length of Filosofia. They were very smart. It was a kibbutz of the geniuses, a house full of smart people. Smart people discuss ideas, lav dafka ideas of Torah. Half the Bacham were reading Kfirah, and half of the Bacham reading Kfirah bought into the Kfirah. Yeah? Chanya Marazov, Elchanan Dei Marazov, who was one of the greatest Tmimim, the Rebbe Rashab said about Chanya, Pnimi, V'Chanya, V'Chaygis Nigezen, learned by their Alter from Slobodka. They're Minsk, right? Alter from Minsk. Minsk. He says in his yeshiva, everybody read books. Everybody read philosophy. He said this Chanya he was born in Cherkasy. He was born in a part of Russia which was very Chassidish. A lot of Chassidish should have it's Chernobyl. His father was a big misnagid, and his father died young. And his mother was afraid. She had a Yosef and a Yesem, a young boy and a young girl. Rachman l'sanz l'harayim to the cat. He'll become a chassid nebuch. So she sent him away to Russia as a boy. She wanted to save him, that Chas V'Shalom, the Chassidim shouldn't ruin him. No, as a rangefallen from the kettle into the fire, he ended up in Lubavitch. She wanted he shouldn't become a Chernobyl, that he went to Lubavitch. He was learning by in Midrash. He says his son Mendel Barazvat from the town, the Tata Gahata Yerushalayim Tivis. That's how he phrased it. My father was naturally God-fearing. So to read Mamash Apocursus, but Spinoza he had to read. Spinoza's Apocursus. Baruch Spinoza was a brilliant man who knew Kabbalah, he knew a lot of philosophy. They put him in Cheder because he wrote things that Hepachachnas Hashem, v'chulu v'chulu, and the most Eid of the Bacher in that yeshiva who wouldn't read other philosophies but Spinoza. So the way the expression is, Bacham Geleren Teira Yemel V'Layla, we can't terechen Shabbos HaSigerat. They learned Teira day and night. They were mamish größer Talmidei Chachamim. But Limud HaMevle De Maise, that because they learned their Erlich. I knew a Yid who's now deceased. His name was Label Zisman. He wrote a book that's called I Believe. I would encourage you very much to read it if you get a hold of it. So Label Zisman, Alav Shalom, he was involved in the 5 towns. By the shliach there, his name is Valovik. So he once Farbrengen Ayitas Kislev. So he told me a bunch of stories. I have a recording of that also. I have to find it. He sat for 2 hours and told stories. And I have the whole thing on tape, I think. So he told me, he told me this. He said, he came from the city of Kovne. Came from the city of Kovne. Kovne is Slabotke. Kovne is divided into 2 sides. There's a bridge. One side of Kovne is called Kovne. The other side of Kovne is Slabotke. Was one of the greatest yeshivas. So he said to me that his father, Labels, was 9 when the war started. His bar mitzvah was in the ghetto. So he told me that his father said to him, Leibke, you shouldn't walk down this street on Shabbos. He told him, don't go down this street on Shabbos. Know what do you think happened? The next Shabbos, 7 o'clock in the morning, he went down that street. And he's walking, it's quiet. When the head for Yid learned Gemara from Kol. Yid is sitting on his porch on a Shabbos morning for Davnin. Learned Gemara sehr Geschmack, sehr Zis. And he couldn't understand why would his father not want him to see it. And he came closer, smoking a cigarette. Chal Shabbos, that ice. You know, it's not electricity, this is fire, this is Eish. Because the neshama was eaten away. In other words, even if they were frum bechitzonius, it was rotting, and it felt like a house of cards. So many Yidden became so frei, so fast. The Rebbe made a special Farbrengen, Tammuz Tavshin Lamed Hey, and he introduced the 2 mitzvahs of kashrus and taras hamishpacha. There was a special Farbrengen. The whole Farbrengen is Moga. You can look at Chelik Gimel Deit's office. I think the date is Yudal. It's right before Shabbos B'Tammuz. Yudal Tammuz. They made a Farbrengen, and he introduced 2 of the 10 mitzvahs, kashrus and taras hamishpacha. The Rebbe started Farbrengen with the following. He says, if you look around, you'll see this point that I'm making. So many Yidden became so frei, so fast. The Rebbe didn't use those oasis, but the Rebbe Kedakev HaKodeš used edel oasis, but the bottom line was the same. And the Rebbe said, I asked myself, how did this happen? Mamish, literally, you're talking about more than 10 million Yidden, who yesterday, from a historical perspective, were frum erlich, and today, they don't even know that they're not supposed to marry a goy. They don't even know what it means to be Jewish. They're not even going to bother telling their children that they're Jewish because it's lost no meaning to them. Rahman al-Islam. It's a few generations. And the Rebbe said, I asked myself, how could this happen? And the Rebbe said, I thought about it, I came to a conclusion. And the Rebbe said that there's says in Sfarim, the Rebbe was from the Sfarim, from the Sifr, Chakiras Sfarim, from the Seder, Akedas Yitzchak and others, and the Ramban, that they say that there are 2 mitzvahs that affect the neshama of a person. Kashrus achil shti and taras hamishpacha. And the Rebbe suggested that perhaps part of the reason why someone Yidden became frei because there was a lapse, there was a negligence in these 2 mitzvahs, kashrus taras hamishpacha. So the Rebbe made 2 mitzvahim, kashrus taras hamishpacha, to strengthen this. You know, I think about this a lot. And when you look up the Sikha, then you'll see that I'm not making this up. You know, we have a new Matthias in the frum world today, which is called OTD. We have a demographic from children. I don't know what the numbers are, 10%, 15%, but it's not 0.5%. There's a substantial number of boys and girls from our community and from Williamsburg and from Borough Park and even from Lakewood that are leaving everything. They're not becoming less frum, you know. They're becoming Mechalei Shabbos and Eichlei Treifes, Rahman al-Islam. And they were looking for solutions. What's the solution? You have to give more hugs. You have to be more accepting. The Lubavitcher Rebbe gave a solution 45 years ago. The Rebbe said where the problem comes from, and the Rebbe said how to fix it. So I made the mistake of telling this to somebody, was Kochzach in the OTD. He says, oh, that's the whole problem. It's too OCD. The kids are frying out because the parents are nuts about kashrus and nuts about sneers, so they'll relax. When the kid did like from it's a machlekes between the psychologist and Lubavitcher Rebbe. It's not the first time such a machlekes happened. The psychologists are saying, if you'll chill, that's the Mishane the Kinder. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe is saying, you'll be more elach, more frum. Und sagt, die Kinder halten schöner und besser. What are you going to do? Listen, the Torah is full of machlokes, right? I once saw a conservative Shulchan Aruch, big fat book with see Hillel and Shammai and Rabbi Nancy. Drei Deis, weißt du? And Hillel Dr. Zeh, Shammai, but Rabbi Nancy found up the heter based on a new limud, the hekesh, and the shabbat mit after stitch. Well, that's it. Wie geht das? Du? Elo di rokem chayim, v'aloche ke, right? What's the keiche that Torah hadif? It's a finished Gemara. You understand? The Rebbe said that the solution to children going away from Yiddishkeit is more zehidus and kashrus, more zehidus. That's what the Rebbe says. The Rebbe made 2 mitzvahs. And it's interessant. I'm making a mistake. It was in the summertime. Tafshil Lametei. This year it's 46 years since that mitzvah was those 2 mitzvahs introduced. Anyway, but this is what I want to share. The Rebbe MaharaSh Nesius was a time of tumultuous change. Tumultuous change. The full-blown effect of that change would take 60 years to show itself, till World War I. 1914, you're talking now, he became a Rebbe in 1866. Between 1866 and 1914 is a be'erach 50 years, a karga 50 years. But the inner corrosion, the inner rotting away of the neshama already started. This is what the Tzemach Tzedek was saying to the Rebbe MaharaSh. Afapi shemesu elu, the Tzadikim, was in the Yesei Deilam, the Welt steht auf See. Afapi shemesu elu, Elokihem shalelu lemesu. In other words, and the Rebbe MaharaSh understood exactly what his father was saying. So b'shas he was standing in front of his father. He didn't want to cause that father's more agmas nefesh to gelacht. Then he walked out of the room when he wasn't next to his father. From a Maisa that I heard. I'll tell you the ganze Geschäft. I'll tell you the whole story of my name and stuff. There's a guy named Joseph Talushkin. Joseph Talushkin wrote the book Zah Rebbe. Joseph Talushkin is a grandson of a big Lubavitcher Chassid who was a big Rav, a Talmud from the Babreisker. So he hated Reb Nissen Talushkin. I think I heard from Isaiah about the Nissen Talushkin that the Rebbe said as the Rav Rosh of New York. Mirdachzich Talushkin. The Rav Rosh of New York, Rav Nissen Talushkin. Mirdachzich. And if it wasn't Talushkin, it was Henkin, but I'm almost positive Talushkin. Nissen Talushkin.
Rabbi Henkin was very recognized. No. Talushkin was not, as far as the name that was...
Sorry, so Mirdachzich, they said Rav Talushkin. Nissen Talushkin, he met the Friedrich of Tzaddik. He went Babreisk. He was part of the competition. He was the antis. There was Lubavitch, there was Kopist, the Babreisk was Kopist. But there was nothing to fight about. There was no Babreisk Rebbe. The world was burning to pieces. When the Friedrich Rebbe came to America, and Nissen Talushkin sought him out. And he said to the Friedrich Rebbe, please tell me what I can do and I'll do it. And the Friedrich Rebbe said, who is this? He was Babreisk. Babreisk was the enemy. Shmenolech Babreisk passed away in 1922. The Rebbe was here in 1929, 1930. And the Shkaka Rebbe, so he had Seichel, he came to the Friedrich Rebbe and says, hey, I'm ready for work. And Hineni, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And you see letters, the Rebbe is asking, who is Nissen Talushkin? The Friedrich Rebbe didn't know who he was. Anyway, he was a bissel nitfus in Tzionis, that's the truth. But it doesn't matter. Listen, we were nitfus in Naveris, it's nitfus in Tzionis. He traveled to Israel in 1948, in the Medina, comes to Medina. Official was a Mizrahi, that political part of Mizrahi. So he knew that when he's in Eretz Yisrael, they're going to say to him, what happened to the Alta L'Tshuvah, Alta L'Geulah? The Friedrich Rebbe stood Alta L'Geulah, and the Friedrich Rebbe officially stopped it. You know that. If our Rebbe, the Rebbe's Ogazons and our Rebbe, used to write in every single letter that he wrote, in Hebrew and in Yiddish, Bebirchas li'alta l'tshuvah alta l'geulah. Look at Nigras Kedesh, you'll see. Every letter the Rebbe would finish, Bebirchas li'alta l'tshuvah, in Iyar, Tashim Ches, it stops. You'll see. When Israel became a state, he stopped writing it. The Friedrich Rebbe said that the Nevuah of the Eve Mashiach was pushed off. Atzukar Kewa, Yetzer, with something a bit less. I think they said, Aragna found in Nish Richtig Gehent. So he knew that he's going to have to defend the Friedrich Rebbe about this question. The Friedrich Rebbe said, after Mashiach kommt, and then mit amol. So he decided to go into the Frierdiker Rebbe and ask. So he went into the Frierdiker Rebbe and he forgot his question. So the Rebbe says, was macht der Rebbe gesund? What's the Rebbe doing? Anyway, he walked out the Frierdiker Rebbe and he remembered his question. Is right not zweiten Mal? I forgot the question again. So whatever second question, he walked out. Again, he remembered his question, and he went in a third time. And the third time he forgot. You imagine? So he saw he saw this is nicht poshet. I mean, he was not an idiot.
So I don't remember the question.
I can't hear you.
I don't remember the question either.
What did you say?
I don't remember the question.
The question was, there was a war in the Holocaust. The Frierdiker Rebbe had said, Mashiach is coming. What happened? Anyway, he came to Eretz Yisrael, and he was surrounded by all the big Mizrachisten. There's a Kumas von Eben, you're a Lubavitcher. What's the middle? So he tells them like this. I have no answer for you. I just want you to know one thing. Bam Rebbe men cheder is die Scheile nicht da. In the Rebbe's room, this question isn't. That's what he said. Bam Rebbe men cheder die Scheile nicht da. So the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe MaharaSh was standing in front of his father. But the Geschmeichel, you understand, what was going to be wasn't yet. When he walked across the skupa to the other side of the door, Dorten, verstehst? What's the point? What am I trying to say? Bring you up depressing and negative things, pessimistic things. First of all, it's a great topic. I would say something positive, you'd be talking. Now you're listening because I'm saying something that's frightening. So I want to hear the end of the story. Verstehst? We are on the other side of that. We are on the other side of that. We're holding by Hine Melech HaMashiach Bo. And if you look back 150 years and you study the statements that the Rebbe made and the Hog of the Rebbe, you start to see that a lot of the things which were revealed by the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe much later on there, it's a long narrative, it's a long story. And you could summarize the story in one word. You could really summarize the story in one word. But the story goes back 150 years.
One word.
Tshuva. That's the word. Tshuva. Tshuva. Yidden were tzadikim. Of course, they were not tzadikim like it says in Tanya. And now we're Bali Tshuva. We're Bali Tshuva. I was at a wedding a couple of months ago. I have a relative who I respect very much. A very sensitive, deep person. And he's not narrow-minded like me. He's very ehrlich, very chassidish, very frum, but he looks at the Bachrim, he's my age, looks at the Bachrim and he reads them. He looks at the Bachrim, he reads them. This wedding was not a Hasidic wedding, let's just say. But it was much better than I thought it would be, actually. See, he sidles over to me, mitten the tanzen, they're dancing. You know, does anybody know the difference between a Hasidic dance and a non-Hasidic dance?
If they don't do it together?
That's right. That's all. If they're holding hands, that's a Hasidic dance. If they're doing themselves, it's a very simple measure. If you want to know if your dancing is good or not, are you be able to touch another person, or you got to move your behind by yourself? That's all. This is for every person. Is it Chassidish? I don't care how crazy it is. You're dancing with other people. Toig. You're dancing by yourself. Toig shenish. It's a fact. Observe. You'll see it's true. Huh?
I agree with that.
Well, I brainwashed you. I paid you extra. But anyway, so he tells me, he says, I was at such a wedding 30 years ago. And the Bacham danced just like they're dancing now. He said, but then they were on the inside looking out, now they're on the outside looking in. And there was a lot of wisdom to that. Tafshin Nun Hey, he got married. And I was at his wedding. It was the same Maimon the Matzif. The Chassidish Bachrim. But they were looking out, unfortunately. He says, these kids, they're not as Chassidish as we were, yeah? But they're looking in. The Rambam, the Gemara says, that before Mashiach comes, it's true. The Rambam Paskins, Right? The Rambam Paskes, if Ticha Teri Yisrael Leisin and Shuvah Miyad, and it was a famous Rambam. The Rebbe said this Rambam 100 times, and he analyzed and he studied and he said it with so much heart, so much neshama. The Torah gives a guarantee before Mashiach comes, you're not going to do tshuva. We are the generation of tshuva. So you're going to start asking me what's the halacha criteria of ador? I don't know, but that's the mitzvahs. We are the generation of tshuva. Practically, it's after the Holocaust. But the process that got us to this point starts a long time ago. Yidden lived in Russia, and Yidden lived in Poland for so long, you have no idea. Yidden lived in Poland since the 14th century, the 1300s.
Even earlier, no?
Huh?
Even earlier.
They were in Western Europe, whatever, after Nachfir. They lived in Russia almost as long. In Western Europe, they had already a chance to be kicked out by then. They were from Yamot. And they stayed in these places for hundreds of years. They built kehillas, they went to pogroms, they went to tachvatat. It was like a good melech. But Hashem came along 300 years ago. That means 2 times 150 years ago. And he brought into the world a koyach alaki. And the emes says the koyach of the Baal Shem Tov is chassidus. Chassidus is really tshuva. Chassidus, you know what tshuva means? I'm not a Jew because my father's a Jew. I'm a Jew because I'm a Jew. I'm not a Jew because my neighbors are Jewish, because it's not going to look good if I'm different. I'm a Jew because I'm a Jew. That's about tshuva. I'm a person for myself. I serve the Eibishter. That's my metzias. Baal Shem Tov came into the world a long time ago. And the emes is, the Baal Shem Tov came in, not for the times of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov came in for now. The Baal Shem Tov's Gilui, the from Yechida, Chassidus Doch Yechida, is about tshuva. And I really believe that there's a lot of truth that's beginning with the Nesiyas of the Rebbe MaharaSh, there was plenty of tzaras before. But at this point, the tzaras begashmias started to push it, spill over the tzaras beruchnias, the shkolas. Russia fought against the Haskalah like lions.
Didn't Mendelssohn like much earlier than that?
But he was in Germany.
Still a kid though.
Yeah, but how many Yidden lived in Germany? You're talking tens of thousands, not millions. Okay, but not 3 million, 3.5 million. It's a little bit of a difference. The whole Western Europe, between England and France and Germany and Austria.
Over 400,000.
When?
I think for the war.
Okay, and how many were there in the 1700s? Much less. Much less. Jews ran away from Western Europe. They lived in Western Europe. They went east. So they immigrated back. You're not talking about millions. I'm not chas v'shalom saying that one Jew who's lost is acceptable. But the big numbers were in Russia and Poland and Galicia. Those are the big numbers of Jews. West Ashkenazi.
Wait, you think the era Baal Tshuva is starting now?
Huh?
You think the era of Baal Tshuva is starting now?
Say again.
And you think the era of Baal Tshuva is starting
Not now. I think it started with the Tzadikim came to America. I think
I think a different kind of Baal Tshuva.
the story that I told is I find interesting. I find it interesting. Is it true? This is what this man told me. He's an observant Jew. He says what he sees, and he sees not bad. And he knows he has to tell it to me because I'm a big Marashkedinik. I'm always looking how everybody's becoming frei and feel terrible. But it's a sensitive word. The point is that the Nesiyas of the Rebbe MaharaSh, so Yidden always fought. And the Haskalah, they tried to come to Russia in terms of the Alter Rebbe. Alter Rebbe threw them out. They came to Russia in terms of Tzemach Tzedek. Tzemach Tzedek couldn't throw them out because they got the government involved. But the Tzemach Tzedek pushed back and pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. The Rebbe MaharaSh became a Rebbe. And again, in Derech Tacht, the split in Lubavitch, the fact that Lubavitch did not have one Rebbe who could stand on behalf of the Chassidim in Russia, alongside the Misnagdim, was probably very costly, but they couldn't fight anymore. There were gymnasias all over Russia. There were basically freie schools, goyish schools with thousands and thousands of Yiddish kids, and they were all from. It's like a kid in America who's from going to public school. But when you're in that environment, okay, you're keeping Shabbos, you're keeping kosher, you're marrying a Jew, but what's inside? What's inside? And eventually what's inside comes out. And if what's inside is rotten, is corroded, is fadorm, safe kol safe, you understand? So then it was down, the famous mice with the Rebbe Rashab, in Akash Baruch Baruch where the Rebbe Rashab says that now you can't think. You cannot think. You have to have Kabbalah Sale and Buna Pshuta Bittel. And the biggest Chachamim, if they're going to use their brains, the Rebbe said, the Loshen Mora Tia Acharisam. Their end is going to be bitter, and it's exactly what happened. The Rebbe said you have to go with the tmimis of an ish pashut and the bittul of an Hashem Pshutim, not be a chocham, not be a smart guy, not have it figured out. In 1870, he said this in 1887. In other words, this is 1866, a little bit more than 20 years after the Rebbe MaharaSh became a Rebbe, the Rebbe MaharaSh made that statement. It's a historic statement, because at the time you couldn't see it. In other words, still, most of the Yidden in Russia were still technically frum. And the Rebbe said, no, it's not as good as it looks. And then over the course of the next 25 years, and then the war, you saw Take.
Were there a lot of Hasidim in Russia though? Wasn't a big portion of the Jews in Russia Hasidim?
And you think Hasidim didn't suffer?
I'm saying they did. What shouldn't the Hasidus have sort of...
So those who were close to the Rebbe held. But it wasn't like 100 years before that there was a Rebbe in every block. I mean, big tzadikim. You go back to the times of the Mittel Rebbe. You know how much competition there was?
Quite a bit.
A lot. There was a Rebbe in Lubavitch. How many Rebbes? How many tzadikim? Those who were close to the tzadikim, that's why Tzemach Tzedek was such a big deal. Tzemach Tzedek was creating a generation of young men. I mean, if you want to cut to the chase and stop beating around the bush, who were pashit mischanech by a Rebbe. Didn't go to Yeshiva and have a Rosh Yeshiva. On paper, this was the Rosh Yeshiva, this Mashpia. The Mashpia and Tzemach Tzedek was the Rebbe Rasha. And that's why they were an army of Baal Mesiris Nefesh. The Rebbe was personally on the face of the Lashon Basir Lagani. Machn is as Atzmei B'Tachsisei Mulchama. Since when is a Rebbe Malamadad teaching little children Torah? But that's what the hour demanded. If you were 2 steps away, it was already a sakana.
You're saying this. There were Hasidim who weren't really, who considered themselves.
Let's say better. They were Rebbes. They were Rebbes. Sada Rebbe. You know that I saw in the Sefer, the Baal Shem Tov once said to the Pirchas Koretzer, he walked outside in Yemei Nissen this time of year, and they saw an apple tree. Apple trees have lots and lots of blossoms. Many, it's very full. And the Baal Shem Tov says to the Pirchas Koretzer, Pinye, du glaubst, sie kommen einmal a Zeit, als sie sein falsche gute Jiden, als sehr viel, wie sie dort Blumen of them boy. There will be a time there'll be so many fake Rebbes as there are blossoms on this tree. Now there's no more fake Rebbes. There's nothing.
The fake ones, everyone knows they're fake Rebbes.
I know, but when you go to a fake Rebbe and it's a good show, it's a good entertainment, aber the Yir Shamayim, the stuff that you need to fight against the Sionis is not there. It's a cliche, it's not mavash. So we're...
So what do they do?
Huh?
I was listening to a podcast by, and they were interviewing a Ger Chassid, and he was saying that a lot of people in Ger, they use different Chassidus to do further avodah.
To supplement, right? The different Chassidus has one name.
Right.
Kabbat.
Well, they use, so some people use, whatever.
Lubavitch. The Mittler Rebbe. There's a bunch of names. The Rebbe MaharaSh. The Kutatera, it's all the same. Good news, so what are you saying?
No, I'm saying so, I'm just reiterating your point, that there's a lot of, even in the big Chassidism of today,
Right.
people are learning Chassidus not necessarily from their tribes.
Chassidus is not a limud. Chassidus is Abbas Hashem and Yiras Hashem. If you're around the real tzaddik, he holds you. But you can't substitute that. You can't substitute. It's just, it doesn't work.
Do you think learning Chassidus without a Rebbe is work?
Learning Chassidus is having a Rebbe.
The people who take Chassidus, and they just use it as like a book, as like a guide, versus the fact that
Anybody who's learning Chassidus is looking for truth.
Well, 100%.
If you want covered in money, you learn Gemara, not Chassidus. I used to tell my Talmidim, you want to get rich, learn Gemara. What about Chassidus? No, Chassidus you don't get paid for. Chassidus is Avodas Hashem. If you're learning Chassidus, you're looking for emes. There's no question about it. Mezucht. Verstehst? So the Rebbe MaharaSh did what the Rebbe MaharaSh needed to do. B'doiroi. The Rebbe MaharaSh fought his battles. The Rebbe MaharaSh fought his battles. There's kama v'kama in Yonim. that we know from the Anhaga that Rebbe MaharaSh, which was not just local, it was to help one person. That Rebbe MaharaSh did things then which were setting a course. I mean, this is just my interpretation for this idea that we're going to go through in terms of Yiddishkeit, an unprecedented darkness, and you're not going to survive. Alakayim Shalalaymes. And that Rebbe MaharaSh did certain things in that direction. Rebbe MaharaSh did certain things in that direction. But I think it's time to sagen, ein Ding, zu zwei Dingen, zu drei Dingen, Chalapach is jetzt so schweigen für ein paar Minuten, wir sind ein bisschen müssen. Nur, does anybody remember noch ein Ding von Rebbe MaharaSh? The Rebbe MaharaSh did not daven in shul. He davened b'yechidus. Even Shabbos, Yom Tif, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur, he davened b'yechidus. But between his office, his cheder yechidus, and the Beis Midrash, there was a door, the shul, where the Anash davened. So during the davening, during the minyan, the door would be open and be a curtain. And it's written that Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur never davened in his own cheder. Farbrengen from terrorists came. For V'hakoyanim, hararai, hararai. You sing V'hakoyanim 3 times, I think. You say it 4 times, you sing it 3 times. The Rebbe would walk out, and he would sing with the chazan, and he would look at the chazan as the chazan not sich gebucht. And then he'd go back into his room. I said, I feared that Rebbe MaharaSh, I saying was in sein Anhage. He davened b'yechidus.
I remember a story about him. I thought I've only heard it from you. That when he was a child, and I think it was Rosh Hashanah, the Tzemach Tzedek was saying the he pointed, Haftarah Rosh Hashanah says, I davened for this child. And she pointed at Shmuel HaNavi. So the Tzemach Tzedek, when he was saying the Haftarah, he gingerly, in the American, pointed with his finger to Rebbe. But anyway, the Rebbe MaharaSh had a niggin from Yom Kippur, from the Ne'il of Yom Kippurim, from the Atev Dalta. You know the niggin, you just told me this thing for Rebbe MaharaSh. It's a tnuah. And he would come out and sing. Yeah, you don't know this niggin.